Hi, Pirates. Today we are talking all things custom AI bots, and we're getting excited because today the Christopher bot is releasing version 1.0, and we're also updating the Pirate Eddie bot to version 2.0. So we have a lot of exciting changes to keep offering bigger and better bots to the pirate ship. And we firmly believe that custom AI bots are not a feature for thought leaders. They are the next. This is where your intellectual capital is everything that you have going for your business because different is the only boat. Different is the only moat.
It's
Could be
actually
the
the
only
only
boat.
boat.
My brain is in pirate ship mode. Anyways, Pirate Eddie has a wonderful escalator analogy of kind of how this transition has happened throughout time. So we'll kick off this podcast about that escalator analogy.
Well, so I was thinking in 1996, when I first started out of college in my consulting career, one of my very good friends, Hugh, and my roommate at the time, he was at McKinsey. McKinsey, if folks don't know, probably the most prestigious consulting firm out there. What I noted about it is that everybody had kind of your standard, I don't know what the dimensions are of a business card. McKinsey's was thinner. And we're just kind of like, what's up with that? He's like, I don't know. But it was different, right? And it was just one of those things that, catches your eye and a conversation started. I remember what it was like to get a business card coming out of college, and it felt, oh, I'm kind of real. I'm kind of legitimate. I kind of made it type of a thing, right? Fast forward, decades later when I started Eddie Wood Grow, I'm like, oh, I need business cards, and I printed out a bunch of them, and I even know where they are. I don't think I gave anyone ever a business card because they evolved, right? The business card eventually became a website. If you didn't have a website in the .com era, like people were like, who are you? And then eventually, as I grew in my career, if as a partner, as a senior partner, and any kind of a thought leader, you kind of needed a book, like not always, but you kind of needed some sort of writing credential that was, supplanted the website, that supplanted the business card. And as we look forward, our forecast is call it in the next couple of years, call it by 2030. If you are a serious thought leader of any kind and you don't have a custom AI bot, it's going to look a little sketchy. Not that you're not legit, but that people might say, well, why don't you have one? And in part, kind of what I notice, Christopher and Bree, is that we have a Pirate Eddie bot, we have a Pirate Christopher bot that we're launching, in part because there's too many questions that we get asked that we've answered over and over. And we have no shortage of thinking that we want to share with the world. And so it's a distribution method to kind of, because we can't be everywhere at the same time. And so that's kind of the first thought, is that thought leadership of any sort will live in a custom AI bot. And that segues to the next point, which is that in as much as there's kind of this arms race between, OpenAI and Anthropic, and, you pick your other LLMs that are out there, the open source models from China, that we actually believe that no matter how good it may be controversial, but no matter how good Opus X.X gets, no matter how good GPT 17.0 gets, right? That it's still generically trained on the world's data. And because those companies need scale, it needs to be as broadly helpful to as many people as possible, which to us sounds watered down. And that if, Christopher, you posted the other day, different is the only moat, and Bree upgraded, different is the only boat in a sea of sameness. Now, what do? Is that we actually think not only will you look weird as a thought leader without a custom AI bot, that a custom AI bot is going to still, well, for one, it'll be different than the generic LLMs, no matter how good they get. And if different is the only moat, you're going to need a custom AI bot. That's kind of where we've landed the thoughts. But I don't know if we're too far out there.
No, well, we might be out there, but if you're in the intellectual capital business, then how you package and scale that IC is everything. And if you are in the make a difference business, that is to say you're you're mission driven and you really want to make a difference, and let's just call it, haven't had coffee this morning. Let's just call it you're mission driven you want to make a difference, and your IC first. That is to say, you're an intellectual capital business. And most businesses today, or certainly many, would call themselves intellectual capital first businesses, right? And in the software business for years, we used to say, oh, the assets walk out the door every day. It's the same thing in the consulting business, right? Okay. So if that's the kind of person you are and or company business you are, there's a big aha here, which is imagine if you could make all of your intellectual capital available to everybody that you want to make a difference to globally, worldwide, all the time, anytime, 24/7, 365. That's really what this is. And I would say it's even more than that. I had an interaction with one of our academy graduates not that long ago, and he was asking for some time so I could look over some of his stuff. And I said, sure. And then he messaged me back and said, oh, still happy to talk to you, but I spent a whole bunch of time with the Pirate Christopher bot, and I think I'm good. And that's the unlock. That's the unlock, right? And we're at a point now, and I know this sounds crazy to a lot of people, where talking to the Eddie or Christopher bot is probably more valuable than talking to us. It certainly is if you're jamming with it, if you're co-creating with it. And this is something I think most people don't realize. So I want to make sure it's clear. I was talking to a friend of mine about this yesterday, and he's not sort of tech savvy, and he hasn't been keeping up with AI. And he's sort of saying, I think I'm going to sit out AI. And I was like, sit out AI? And one of the things that he didn't realize, he sort of just saw AI as a search replacement. And as I began to explain to him how you can vibe create with AI, and how when you have a custom purpose built AI, because it's niche down, because it's so deep in the intellectual capital that it's trained on, that it's focused on, that it's purpose built for, what you can do with it in terms of how you build things with it is exponential. And I think this is the part that a lot of people miss. We're far beyond just going from search to answer, which was certainly the beginning of AI, but we've now gotten to a place where AI is a collaborator, is a co-creator, is a co-founder of our careers and our companies. And so if you are somebody who historically has written books and courses and things along those lines, the next logical evolution is a custom Pirate Eddie bot or Pirate Christopher bot, because from there, the people that you serve, the people that you want to make a difference with, not only can they consume your content in a way that's tailored to them, they can ask a question about something. They can tell me, they can say, start at the beginning, tell me all about category design, or they can go to a specific issue. I'm planning a lightning strike. What should we be mindful of? But here's the part that most people don't realize. You can take your draft lightning strike plan, put it into a bot in our case, and get feedback from the bot on your lightning strike plan. And so if you've historically thought of yourself as a consultant, as an advisor, as a thought leader, as a creator, these kinds of things, well, guess what? You can make yourself available to everybody at scale. The other thing I would say is, if you are an executive or an entrepreneur, if I was a CMO today, as I was back in the day, I would have a Christopher bot so that anybody in the company who wanted to talk to me about anything could at any time. Now, is the bot always going to be right? No. Are there these things called hallucinations? Yes. However, the technology gets better every day. The worst AI you're going to use is the one that you use today, because it's going to be improved tomorrow. And this is a part that I think most people understand, because they're used to using Claude or ChatGPT. The future of AI is niched down, purpose-built, focused AIs on a certain area, to Eddie's point earlier. Does Claude know the basics of category pirates, category design, creator capitalist? Sure. Can it help you build your four capitals the way a custom purpose-built AI can? Absolutely not. And that is going to get truer and truer over time, because, as Eddie said, the purpose-built big consumer-facing AIs are trying to catch everything. Custom-built niche-down AIs are focused on a specific issue, be it creator capitalist, be it category design, be it a medical issue, be it a scientific issue, be it a finance issue. There are new application companies that are building exactly this for different parts of the enterprise. I'm involved with one that's involved with financial data governance, et cetera, et cetera. And so Niche down, purpose-built AIs are the future. And if you're in the intellectual capital business, you got to have one.
Well, and you see it even with, I mean, this is the power of category design, is that even within the great AI LLM race, that part of the reason why we're all talking about Claude is because they niche down on code in a way that OpenAI did not. Anthropic niched down on enterprise in a way that OpenAI was like, let's just kind of be consumer and enterprise and this and that. And so the same principle of why custom AI bots will kind of last and stand the test of time, no matter how good the generic LLMs get, is the same principle that is causing the race to be defined
Yes.
within the large scale LLMs as well. And that I think what Christopher, you kind of you called this early with when ChatGPT came out about its search to answer. And what we know, and again, thanks to category design for this, thanks to super consumers for allowing us to see what the super consumer wants here. It was search. Now they want answers. But what they really want, because why is a super super? They're on a quest to solve an existential mission or crisis for them that's going to exponentially transform their lives. That's why they are super.
And
That's why they spend a lot.
they
So
want
they're not,
outcomes, right? Nobody
they want,
buys a book
yes.
to read the book.
So it's going from search to answers, ultimately to outcomes. There's probably progress in the middle on the way to
Yep, for
outcomes,
sure.
but you have to have niche down on the problem with a very specific POV. And then here's where, the real Christopher, the real Eddie, the real Bree can get you outcomes. However, you can't always get us on the phone or on a Zoom, right? Bree's in Costa Rica right now. Christopher is Christopher, right? I run out of words at 3 or 4 o'clock. Like, there are limitations to what we can actually do to get you to the outcomes. And the AI versions of us don't have those limitations. Like, you can talk to Eddie, the pirate Eddie bot, in a way that he will never run out of words. You can get Christopher when you need him, and he'll be there to jam it out with you. And these are things that are just undeniably true about them. And we see that in our supers and our founding tier that are using it this way.
And I
You
got to
guys
tell you, as we're
also,
having this, sorry, go ahead, Bree.
did you see that Claude released Claude Design about 2 weeks ago? And this is a further proof point that even as Claude is doing it, they're niching down on certain problems for other people in order to solve it and have outcomes in a way that a general Claude can't do. OpenAI isn't doing that, and the Claude design is going to release. It's going to be incredible in 1 month. Right now, it's still struggling, but it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So they're niching down within these problems, serving their supers in the same way that all the pirates on the pirate ship need to have a bot for their intellectual capital. It's the exact same further proof point of this is where the future is headed.
And as we're having this conversation, I'm having these flashbacks to 1997 and 1998 when we were starting Scient, one of the first purpose-built internet e-business companies, consulting companies. And we ultimately became the fastest growing consulting company in history. And I think the fastest shrinking, but that's a whole other conversation. But in the very early days, being part of the early build out of the internet, building Chase Bank's customer facing website and working with E-Trade and building the first iteration of realtor.com with those folks and on and on and on. I mean, very early helping to build out what you would call the commercialization of the business internet with a heavy focus on e-commerce as well as B2B interactions. Anyway, back in those days, there were a lot of people saying, you don't need a website. Nobody's on the internet. What are you talking about? It's a lot of money and you got to hire all these people. It's very expensive. There's a tremendous amount of custom development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the conversation we're now having about do I or don't I need a custom bot? It will be as obvious in 3 years from now as it is today that you have to have it, like you have to have a website and a business card. Although I think nobody has business cards anymore, but that's a whole other conversation.
I might be the last one.
I went to a conference that I had them, and I think I was the only guy with them. I have very sexy business cards, but nobody wants them. That's a whole other conversation. The point being this, if you're in the intellectual capital make a difference business and you want to do it at scale, AI is the answer. And the AI you want is an AI that people can actually work with. We call it jamming. In the engineering world, they call it vibe coding. We've coined the term vibe creating. I was explaining to this friend of mine yesterday who said he was He's my age. He said he's sitting out AI. I said, what do you mean you're sitting out AI? Are you insane? Right. And I tried to explain to him this, this concept of vibe creating, where you actually never start generic by yourself. You start with a prompt and you collaborate with the AI. And amongst the three of us, I was explaining to him, he's like, well, but AIs aren't human and this and that. I said, you're not looking at it the right way. It's a thought partner. And I said, the way we do it, the three of us work with AI on our own, and then we collaborate back and forth. And I'm sure we take some of the things that we're collaborating with and dump it into AI and bring it back into the collaboration. That's what we're doing. This is the new way to create, and it's exciting. And here's the other interesting thing. If I'm not mistaken, it's the fastest growing part of our business, is it not? So maybe, I mean, Bree, you set all this stuff up. Maybe sort of shine a light on how bots became the fastest growing part of Category Pirates business.
Well, I think human behavior is changing, and that's also changing within the pirate ship. Everybody wants to be in the Category Design Academy. The entry point into the academy isn't always feasible at this moment in time for everybody, but when you have a bot giving you a similar access to what it's like to be in the academy, highly desirable. And I was in the Pirate Eddie bot a year ago. I've used it over the past year, and then I've really entered into it this time again. And the change of how much category design work the Pirate Eddie bot can do with you right now is impeccable. It's just completely, we started it out as a librarian. It would answer a question. You could go back to the mini book. You could do your own thinking. And now the Pirate Eddie bot is at a point where it can do your thinking with you. And so back to the same point of human behavior, just last night, as Eddie said, I'm in Costa Rica and I'm subleasing from a girl who lives here full time, and she has these arrangements of flowers on the table. And one was looking a little low on water. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a good subleaser, and I'm going to go refill it. So I touch the plants. I go to take some of the dead pieces out. I put the water in. I put it back on the table. I'm like, yes, nice, very good. Turns out I was allergic to the plant. And I start getting this just massive burning sensation on my face. It was terrible. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. I'm amazed I'm sitting here this morning and there's not blisters on my face. It was so bad. I call up my friend who's just down the road, has been in Costa Rica for about most of the time over the past 2 years. I was like, hey, has this ever happened to you? He was like, no, sorry, I don't know how to help you. Like, I've never seen this, never heard it, never happened to me. I'm on the phone for about a minute and I'm like, okay, you're no good to me. Like, I got to go to an AI right now. Like, I have to go figure out what's happening. And a year ago, I would have taken a photo of those flowers and put it into OpenAI, into ChatGPT. And to the same point, we've had a lot of conversations on the pirate ship of trust within AI. This time this year, I was not putting that into ChatGPT because I don't have the same trust a year ago. I went right to Gemini because I knew it was going to answer a question based on all of this search and inquiry, all the things Google is hosting. I plug it right in and it says, hey, cold compress, wash it off with some thick soap, grab the dish soap, don't grab the hand soap, put some hydrocortisone all over your face. I lathered that on like there was no tomorrow. And it worked. It started like maybe 20 minutes. It started to subside. And I was like, wow, wonderful. But I don't think OpenAI or ChatGPT could have done that for me in the same way Gemini did, whereas a year ago it would have. And so within that, trust is changing with who you're going to, what LLM you're using. And we had someone on the pirate ship, and Eddie can tell this story a little bit more, come to us and say, I just really trust the Pirate Eddie bot because I know it's you guys behind it. In the same way where I trusted Gemini because I know that Google and all the information and all the medical stuff is on Google's platform in a way that OpenAI just doesn't have. And so I think that's why it's part of the fastest growing part of the pirate ship is because of the trust. You know the thinking behind it. You know there's people writing it. You know where that data is coming from. And people want that access to information and that trust as they build their categories in a way to have a massive outcome for themselves and for other people.
So what's so fascinating about that is if you're Google in the category of search, you provide 10 blue links, you click one wrong link, not a problem, right? You move to answers. Okay, now the stakes get a little higher, right? You get to outcomes. am I going to die of anaphylactic shock or what? Like then it really matters, and the trust factor just elevates up. So as the consumer is looking for more outcomes, the trust factor is going to go up. And the story that you were referencing was, I have a good friend of mine. I used to work with him. His name's Kyle Okimoto. He's going to come on the pod and tell his story. But super smart guy, very accomplished. Worked with me at Cambridge, and then was the head of strategy for Merrill Lynch's wealth management department. A bunch of Cambridge partners went to go run that whole thing, and then he was the head of marketing at E-Trade, and he's kind of building out a solopreneur business now. And what was so fascinating for him was number one, he's a laid back Hawaii guy, but he sends me this text is like, the Pirate Eddie bot is effing awesome. I'm like, tell me more about that, right? And he's got this business, then I won't do it justice, but in effect, we talk about niche down. This is for people. He's from Hawaii like me. So people in Hawaii, but although it's broader than that. If you have a family, an ownership stake in a family investment, say commercial real estate that it was passed on to you and this and that, and it's really complicated and nobody's really in charge, and you own it with your cousin that you get along with and the uncle who at Thanksgiving and drinks too much. You don't want to really be around that guy that too long. Like nobody's really in control. He has a process that figures out how to consolidate all the ownership into one batch, sell the commercial property, and redeploy it in a way that gives people a lot more liquidity and investment. And so he's got the perfect resume to do this. He's a local from Hawaii, so people will trust him on this front. But this is a high trust factor that he has to get right. And so he has all access to all the AIs. And what he said was, I went with the Pirate Eddie bot because I trusted you. And he was pointing at me and I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, I've known you for decades. I know your family. I know we have the same value system. I know your intellectual capital. And for somebody who has built a career on being very, very rational, he made an emotional decision point around trust. And, just like Bree, you did of like, I mean, you're not saying this out loud, but like, do I really trust Sam Altman? Maybe I'll trust the Google guys like a little bit more. And that
Exactly.
in a case where you're framing, naming, and claiming something that's so personal to you as your solopreneur, my buddy Kyle is like, I just trust the rigor of your IC, but I trust the integrity of your IC. And this was something different for me, Christopher, was like, I think people will talk about that. That was really cool. That was brilliant. That was insightful. But I think underneath it is what people know is that when you go on the pod and you're just kind of giving away all the knowledge that you've accumulated over the years that you would charge a pretty penny for, that when people hear us talking about when you've made it up to the top, you throw a rope down. When they hear us talk about the business case for being a missionary and not a mercenary, there's a certain set of values that undergirds our intellectual capital that has bred a level of trust in us that, people know like we don't get everything right. The bots may not get everything right. But the intent that they feel behind the IC is that we have their best interests at heart. And therefore they will entrust the Pirate Eddie bot or
Yes,
the Pirate Christopher bot with decisions that they will not trust another generic
that's right.
LLM.
And the interesting thing about that is, so if you go back to first principles, what AI is doing is commoditizing existing knowledge, making existing knowledge closer to free every day. And in order to do that at scale, which is exactly what OpenAI and Perplexity and Grok and of course ChatGPT are doing, they're consuming the internet essentially to do this, right? Well, what's on the internet? Most of what's on the internet is what you might think of as obvious, and in some cases radically obvious. So as a matter of fact, I had lunch with a 24-year-old rock star young marketer yesterday. And I said, here's the difference. Pick your favorite AI and tell it to write you a great, powerful marketing blog. Just tell marketing blog and see what it comes back with. And of course, what it's going to come back with is a bunch of radically obvious that maybe if you were a brand new kid in business, maybe you'd need to hear a few of those things, fine. But for most people who've been in business for 20 minutes or longer, most of what they're going to read is going to be radically obvious. And the truth is, that's most business content. I dare you to find anybody who ever said, wow, that was a legendary SAP email. It never happened, ever. And so the challenge is we are drowning in a sea of content, free content that is radically obvious. And you see it in every meme, it's everywhere, right? So that shit's free. And the truth is nobody consumes that shit. And that shit makes very little difference. What does make a difference, where the breakthroughs live, is in the non-obvious. So if you're in the business of non-obvious intellectual capital, which translation is every differentiated company, then your ability to harness that radically differentiated, specific, detailed, massive depth, that's your competitive advantage. And that's the advantage that you have to give to others. And so my point in all of that is, are the AIs great for a bunch of things? Absolutely. But they contain mostly the obvious. And so unless you're willing to write a 3-paragraph, 6-paragraph prompts full of non-obvious connections and try to get the generic AI to help you with those connections, which you can do. But if you're working in a specific area, you want a purpose-built AI. And because when you go to a purpose-built AI and you say, create a non-obvious blog for me about marketing, what you're going to get is something very, very powerful. And so if you're looking for non-obvious breakthroughs, which most people who are consuming intellectual capital are, then you got to have a purpose-built AI to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I would say I'd layer on that, what you're framing is the obvious, non-obvious gives you, to your point, different is the only moat, right? And I would also assert one of the things that we've said is that AI will make humans more human because humanity is the last part that AI cannot take, right, at this stage. And that part of what we mean by humanity is that is is a sense of trust, values, integrity, character. These are the intangibles, right? That when you do an AI and you prompt it, you do a custom AI bot, you can choose, hey, go ahead and guess if you want to, put some swinging wild ass thing out there. Or you can say, no, no, no. It is very, very important that you do not hallucinate in this, the facts and only the facts. It is very, very important that you tell somebody, hey, before you take the price up, go test it out in a small stakes way, right? There are certain business decisions that are two-way doors, and there are certain business decisions that are one-way doors. And that there are ones when you combine non-obvious, different, right? That level of thinking that, we've built over our careers with a high degree of humanity. Like our goal, just like Joe Pine wrote his book, The Transformation Economy, it is about human flourishing. Category Pirates is about unleashing the abundance of 100,000 category designers into the world. This is, do we run it as a commercial enterprise? Yes. But is money making the ultimate goal? No. Right. And that you have to combine that humanity with non obvious. And that's what is going, that is what I think will take our Pirate Christopher bot, Pirate Eddie bot, and give them long, long legs. And I think for you out there, if you are a thought leader or you're an executive and you're rising up and you want to build, you're like, okay, I get it. I got to build my own custom AI bot. We encourage you to do it with non-obvious, but with as much humanity as you can bring about who you are and what you are, because there will always be bad actors in business. And that part of what you have to, if you are a person of substance, what do you call it? A material impact executive. Some of them are mercenaries, some of them are missionaries, but you want the missionary, non obvious combination. You get that. You will trust that LLM, that AI bot to take you from quest to outcome in a way that, be very careful if you get a non obvious mercenary one, could be kind of scary.
Well, and actually, this is an interesting point because whenever there's a massive breakthrough category that is at the societal level, like the internet was, like mobile phones and smartphones, and like AI now, it will attract a ton of shysters, a ton of douchebags. And that's just what's going to happen. It's happening. The interesting thing about that is if you are a real human being that actually is mission driven, that actually has some values, that actually gives a shit about making a difference for the people that you serve, your ability to stand out in this world is quite something. At the very beginning, when I first started becoming a greater capitalist, when my first book, our first book, Play Bigger, was coming out, and I started podcasting and these types of things, I had a lot of mental RAM that was consumed with, I don't like a lot of the people that are in the pool that I'm in now, the Gary VDs and all of these kinds of horrible people, hustle porn stars and the like. And I just realized over time as I did it that that fear was misplaced because people can tell the difference. I just spoke at the legendary Military Creator Con. It was an absolute joy. And we had some of our graduates there who were in the military. And one of them in particular came up to me and, gave me a big hug and stuff. And he said, not that I didn't expect it, but he said, I'm really happy to see you in person, that you're the same. And I said, what do you mean about that? And we had this conversation that there are people who play characters on the internet. We're at a time, right, Bree, where so much is performative. It's really hard to tell what's real. Forget the AI. Forget the fact that we're swimming in videos of like cats saving drowning people and comments of people thinking it was real. It's like, no, the cat didn't save the person. That was AI. That's one kind of inauthentic. And then there's this other inauthentic, of course, which is all these performative assholes who have a personal brand, and they try to act in a way that they think the rest of the world wants them to act. And that's called being a phony. For those of us who read Catcher in the Rye, there's nothing worse than a phony. And so my point in all of that is there's an interesting point of differentiation in the native digital world, which is if you are yourself, you're not performative, you're not acting, you're not a shyster, you're actually Joe Pine, right? What's Joe Pine? Joe Pine is a thought leader who actually has some leading thoughts, who's put decades of primary research, thinking, working directly with some of the greatest companies and greatest people in the world, et cetera, and synthesizing it into a set of thoughts, set of frameworks around the experience economy and now the transformation economy. It makes a huge difference. There's nobody in the world when they experience any kind of Joe Pine, whether it's you pick up a book in a bookstore or you see him on a podcast or whatever, there's not one person that goes, I wonder if Joe Pine's like Andrew Tate. Right? There's nobody who thinks that. And so my point in all this, it's a well overused word. I hate to use it, but so I'm not going to. The words authentic or authenticity. But if you're yourself and you translate that into your AI, this is where AI can help make us incredibly human. AI can be incredibly empathetic, right? And so as long as you come from that place, not only are you going to be successful, you're going to stand out in a world of inauthentic donkeys.
Well, I'll build on this because we just had the great Tim Cook just relinquish the reins as CEO, right, at Apple.
The single greatest run of all time. When he took over, Apple was roughly $350 billion in market cap. And we can check right now, but it's roughly $4 trillion now.
So with that run, so 10 bagger in market cap, right? And we've had our thoughts of like, hey man, Vision Pro didn't quite hit it. You took a swing, didn't quite hit it. Project Titan, the car, you pulled the plug, probably the smart thing. Now, not the smart thing when Elon was trying to call you to sell Tesla to Apple, you probably should have taken the call, but that's a whole different story. But if what is so interesting about this in the age of AI, and people are second guessing, like, did Apple make the right? I mean, they had Siri, but they have no LLM, and are they just going to do the? Oh, now my Siri is activated, so I got to turn it off. And then, did they make the right call? Are they just going to outsource it out to whatever? What is interesting is that they are in a position of strength more than they would normally be, because I think what one of Tim Cook's perhaps most underrated contributions was the singular bet that he made on privacy. He drew a big red line and said, you shall not pass. And I could care less if it's the police, the US government, Apple can't even pass that in a way that, you remember, I'm kind of looking it up now. 2016, there's a San Bernardino, I forget, someone was a shooting or whatever, and they wanted to open the phone of the shooters. Can't do it, right? App tracking transparency, right? We talk about Sam Altman. Not a lot of people trust Zuck, with that, right? And you look at what Tim Cook has done, right? He has made privacy the equivalent of the $1.50 at hot dog at Costco. You shall not violate this principle. No one can. And by doing so, it was the category design of trust that even I don't know that Steve Jobs would have died on that hill. Maybe, maybe not. But, when you look at how he got to that, 11 bagger, 300 billion to 4 trillion, was on the ecosystem, was on the services that you provide there. All of that requires an inviolate level of trust that the consumer has to say, you will not screw me over with this. I don't really know of lot of, I mean, you tell me, Christopher, I don't think there are many tech companies that have invested as much into trust like that. But I think that's
No,
why custom AIs are going to win.
Google is somewhat similar, but to your point, Apple is incredibly strong there to a level that I think is absurd. For example, when a judge issues a search warrant for a smartphone, in general, not always, but in general, Apple just gives them the Heisman and just puts law enforcement through a set of hoops that I know the cops in my town. They will say to you, look, if we can go get it, but it's going to take a long time and it's going to be very hard. I think they've over-rotated there. However, the point is the point, which is in a world where our digital footprint, listen, the reality is our smartphone knows more about us than anybody, knows more about us than us. So Cook was right. If it's not safe, if it's not secure, if we can't trust it like it's part of ourself, because it now is. I'll give you a simple example. When was the last time you left the house and you were driving away and you realized you didn't have your smartphone? What did you do? Well, I would assert, you tell me, do 80% of people go home?
Well, yeah, probably
Oh,
higher.
90,
Yeah,
99.
maybe
Right.
95.
Even if let's say you're already late, you forgot your phone because you're running late, you're still going to turn around and get your phone. Why? Listen, most people would rather lose an arm than their smartphone. So most people today value the tech more than part of their body
Well,
because it's part of their body,
it's part of their
part
body.
of their life.
I don't know if Tim Cook made this bet with a business case or it was an emotional integrity character stand that he picked with it. All I know is it was prescient as all get out because he probably saw I don't know. There's probably I would not be surprised if he said, you know what, privacy will become more scarce than uranium going forward. We live in a world where there is no privacy
That's
anymore.
absolutely correct.
And he made a bet on privacy that it would escalate in, privacy is the Bitcoin equivalent of, there's scarcity. This is going to rise in value and I'm going to make it a bet. A brilliant business decision. And I think indicative of where the real value, if you want to get to where the puck is, non-obvious and trust building in your IC to get to the consumers, the outcomes that they actually want. And so I think just from we're making that bet. I don't know if we are as trustworthy as maybe we think we are, but we know we're a lot more trustworthy than some of the shysters out there with it.
I trust us.
Yeah, I think
Bria, I don't know if you know, when we founded Category Pirates, Eddie and I had to create a 4,363 page legal document as our partnership agreement.
That's about
I don't even
4,000
have
more pages than
I don't
expected.
even have access to our money. I couldn't get our money if I tried. I sort of vaguely know where it might be, but I wouldn't know how to get it. Yeah, look, here's the interesting thing about trust. It's been said a million times in a million ways, but without trust, nothing happens, right? No business can transpire. No relationships can. Look, when we walk out our front door, we trust that we're not going to get killed by our neighbor, right? So there's trust operating at all levels at all times, right? And so to your point, listen, Apple's more important than almost every country in the world. And some people might argue that any single country. And so if we can't trust Apple, we're in a lot of trouble, right? And that is something that can be created at the micro niche category level, right? You can be, listen, we have somebody in our orbit in the academy who is in a very specific niche in flooring. Flooring, it's a massive category. And it turns out it's an incredibly important strategic category for a whole bunch of reasons. And her and her business have developed a reputation for being extraordinarily trustworthy in this domain. And if your flooring fails, really bad things happen. And often they get brought in after the flooring fails. And so my point is, in any kind of business, we trust that the floor will be there. And so in that sense, without trust, nothing can happen.
Amen.
So businesses who are committed to being trustworthy with their customers, yes, and in a world of shysters online, even more powerful, right? You and I will spend $2,000 on Amazon to buy a whole bunch of shit and not think about it. We will buy a new laptop, multiple thousands of dollars from apple.com and never think for a second, are they going to rip me off? Is it really going to come? Is it going to be what I said it was going to be? If I have a problem, will I be able to return it or call them? Or that's not a concern. There's a famous, John Rossman taught me this about Bezos in the very early days. The thing Bezos was most obsessed with, we have to make returns as easy as possible. And everybody in the space was focused on making them as hard as possible. He said, no, you don't understand. People will buy from us and they'll buy more from us if they know that they can return it and it's not going to be a problem. So we have to make it as simple and easy as possible. That's called building trust.
It's the equivalent of a rabid dog that has been abused rolling over and showing its belly, because the returns are the economic bane of any retailer. It is the number one reason why you'll go bust, because it's just such a black hole. And to make that extremely vulnerable is an extraordinary amount of trust, as you were just describing. And I think in part, where this is all going is, so non-obvious, high trust, mercenary, niche LLMs and custom bots, right? And that what the part that the third piece of the component that I think we're going to talk about is, again, this might have been a dream hallucination I had, but I think it's the right thing, is that when we did the 1.0 version of the EddieBot, we're shoving it all into Delphi training material. The more the merrier, right? And it'll just kind of magically happen, and it works. Okay, right? And you have kind of the RAG system retrieving and this and that, and like, okay, we got to make it easier, better. Turns out more is not always better. It's a parabola, right? Like you need enough to get going, but too much and it gets confused and doesn't draw from the right thing, right? But then the other one is, it's not shoving all the IC or having enough IC. It is playing Jeopardy. And what do I mean by that? It's the very, very famous game show that is oriented not around answers, but around questions, right? And so when we talk about the category from search to answers to outcomes, right? In that last layer is the question. Because what Christopher and I have learned over years of advising and this and that is that answers are the commodity. Asking the right question is worth 10 times to 100 times more than getting the right answer. Because the right answer to the wrong question is kind of useless. And so what Jeopardy does, right, they take all the trivia that they have and they organize it into themes. And in the same way, we're taking all the knowledge that we've ever written about or had stuck in our brains that we're talking about in an AMA or a jam session with the Academy, and we're going to organize it into themes. Pricing, lightning strikes, innovation, business model design, turnaround, whatever that might be, right? So you organize them into themes just like columns in Jeopardy. And then the real magic is not just saying we shove that into the data point, but we say, no, usually in an AMA or an Academy jam session, people are asking hyper-specific questions. You mentioned Pirate Sylvia with her flooring business. Like, how do I do a lightning strike in the flooring business, right? That's a question that's unique to her. We like to think we provided an answer that was helpful to her with that. What we need to do is play Jeopardy in a way that takes that core question and elevates it to the point where it's a little broader in application to people who are not in the flooring business, because at the core of it is a general question about pricing, is a general question about lightning strikes. And that, in Sylvia's case, where she was like, how do I get people to become aware of the fact that they're getting screwed and ripped off on their flooring contracts and I'm the better option that costs them nothing? In her case, it was, let me bake a bunch of cookies with their faces on it and I'll get their attention that way. And that, worked out really great for her, right? But it's the playing Jeopardy with your knowledge base, organizing them into themes, reframing it into a question, and taking the question and finding the right kind of Goldilocks of specific enough so that it's helpful, but broadly applicable enough so that it's not just to the Pirate Sylvias of the world with it there. And that process is something that takes a lot of manual work, but we are making a bet that Claude Cowork can help us automate that over time, and that is the Jeopardy journey is in that transition of how do we take all the stuff that's rolling around in our brains and play it in the Jeopardy, because the reason why we're launching the 2.0 version of the Eddie bot and the 1.0 version of the Christopher bot is what we have figured out is that that is the singular best way to train the models. It is not shoving an article. It is not shoving a YouTube video and just letting it do its thing. It is, in fact, taking your IC and inverting it into the right Q&A pair. And thank you, Delphi, you allow us to upload that into that specific thing so that when the user asks the question, a pre-prepared, really strong answer comes out, and then the LLM can riff on that, no problem at all, right? But we can also make sure we've added a layer that the EddieBot will now answer in a structure that says, what, so what, and now what? And here's the mini book in the source so that you can go dig for yourself, which is the same format that we use in, Thinkers High in our book there. But we are doing the work to make sure that you spend less time on the search or the answer on your question before you even get to it so that you get to the outcome even faster and better. And that's the work. It's a lot of hard work that is going to start out manual that will become automated. But where we are headed is every 6 months, we're going to launch a new version. 3.0 is coming out in 6 months for the EddieBot. 2.0 is coming out in 6 months for the Christopher bot. And these upgrades are going to be in there. And what you
Note the
have to
Christopher bot will forever be behind the Eddie bot, but please continue.
wait, that's
As it should be. Exactly.
why you mentioned the other thing. So this is a test of the AI as well. So you might be asking, like, why the two bots? What's going to be different, other than obviously the persona and voices are different and all that. The bottom line: if you want swearing, go to Christopher. If you don't want swearing, come to
The Christopher
Eddie
bot
bot.
will swear at you. The Eddie
Yeah,
bot won't.
yeah. That's kind of so. Up to you. Dealer's choice, right? However, the other thing is that the Christopher bot, we are leaning towards emphasizing the podcast, the Eddie bot, the mini books. So, in the way that we know we do it in the academy, is that the Eddie bot will be a little more direct. You ask this question, let me give you a business answer. The Christopher bot will go a little long story longer and tell you a story, a parable, as it were, just like Jesus did. When you ask a question, he will tell you a story, take you out of your frame of reference, and bring you back in a healthier, stronger place than you would have been. So we are trying to design different experiences so that you can kind of play. And we encourage all of our founding to people to ask the same question of both bots and tell us if it works or not with it, because we would like it not to be the same. We would like it to be both non-obvious and high trust, but that this is kind of, we believe we've cracked the code on continuous improvement. And just know that anytime you see that we do an academy or an AMA, those questions are all going to be filtered for the gems and the nuggets, and then Jeopardyized. I don't know what the right framing of it is, but converted into a Jeopardy style Q&A that gets uploaded in Delphi. And that's the reason why the AI bots will compound and get stronger and stronger. The more we talk, the more we write, the smarter the AI gets. And then we're going to release a new upgraded version every 6 months.
And within this, I have to beat the dead horse, if you will, on the two different bots and their unique elements that people are going to have, because I've been messing with them this past week and trying to break them, see what they'll respond with. And I kind of touched on this earlier of the difference in 2.0 Eddie versus 1.0 Eddie is just spectacular. And I've had a question in my head that's not the most important, but it's been percolating, ruminating back there. I wanted an answer. And so finally I woke up one morning and I was like, dummy, go ask the Pirate Eddie bot. Like, of course. Why not? And I've been thinking about this question for several months, and all of a sudden, within 10 minutes, Pirate Eddie bot was like, poof, here's your answer. I was like, wow, I can't believe, like, here I am on the pirate ship and I know all these things, and it took me that long to go into the Pirate Eddie bot and get an answer to my question. So then I got curious. And I was like, okay, let's go to the Christopher bot. And it's unique because, in the same way, if you're in the academy and we're in a workshop together, Eddie will come in and give his answer to the question, and then Christopher will come in and give his answer. We'll start riffing, we'll start jamming, they'll have different things. And you can do the same thing with the bots. You can go to Eddie bot, he'll answer it. Now go paste that answer into the Christopher bot, see what he says about it, and you can go back and forth almost as if you were in the academy and in a workshop getting answers from both of them in order to get to that ultimate place of like, oh, here's the direction, here's the umbrella forward. And it's just going to keep getting better and better too. And the other really interesting thing of one of these points is their voices are unique. And especially over the past year, Pirate Eddie bot sounds very similar to Eddie in the real world. And Christopher bot, as we're training it and people are using it, it's getting there too. And it's going to be super interesting to have this kind of playfulness with the bots and the IC and the different answers. And then you can think about it. And it's just going to be spectacular. I have to beat the dead horse on that one, especially after I've had this question ruminating in my head for so long. And then Pirate Eddie bot came in 10 minutes. Ugh. Crazy.
Well, this is a situation where style can be substance in that, we've all been there. Someone says a thing, somebody else repeats it, and the room goes, oh, right. I mean, the presentation matters, delivery matters. And, if you want, I think Christopher and I are different versions of velvet hammers. You want a little more velvet, you come to me. You want a little more hammer, you go to Christopher. Although sometimes, cranky Eddie gets the inverted way with it, but that ability.
As a side note, I can always tell when Eddie's writing something. When cranky Eddie comes out in the right, I'm like, wow, it's getting real angry in this document.
Your humanity is what people want, right? So I think the more of the non-obvious thinking we pour into it, the more of our humanity and our voice that we also pour into it. That is the goal, is that hopefully we can get better, because what we know is that incentives drive outcomes, right? And that at some level, OpenAI and Anthropic, they need to go public, to be able to continue the CapEx that they need to get to, but that's their incentive. And you can imagine the outcome that's necessary, or that's their outcome that they want. And the incentives create behaviors that they will do to get there. For us, our goal is, how do we impact and unleash 100,000 category designers? The math is just, we're not going to live long enough to be able to do that through the academy. And the Substack is answers. It's not quite outcomes, right? The Pirate Eddie bot, the Pirate Christopher bot is much, much closer to outcomes. And so we need to get those bots to tens of thousands, and if not hundreds of thousands. And that'll be our singular goal with that. And with all that to be said, last thing I want to mention is that just an announcement to the pirates is that we are taking a price increase, because, everything we value, we've been taught to value. So
it's mostly because gas prices are up.
Gas prices are up, right? Straits of Hormuz, you must open up.
But by the way, as a side note, I saw this hysterical thing on the internet the other day where this guy goes to these people, mostly younger people, I'm sorry to say, Bree, says, there's been all this talk about the Straits of Hormuz. Aren't you worried about the gays of Hormuz? And there's all this video out there talking about how we need to save the gays of Hormuz because we're over-rotated on the Straits of Hormuz. Oh my God, it's just too funny. It's like, what kind of... These people can't be allowed to vote or procreate.
Hey, you got to make jokes.
We got to save the gays of Hormuz. Bree, we got to save the gays of Hormuz.
See? There you go. Difference in the Pirate Eddie bot. Let's talk about a price increase. Let's talk about something else. That's Christopher bot right then.
Zebra. Sorry. Anyway, that's the reason for the price increase is because we need to save the gays of Hormuz.
Yeah. That you're not going to get that from Claude or ChatGPT, I'm pretty sure.
You can't get that for ChatGPT.
You might get that from the Christopher bot, yes.
They're going to have to raise their prices over there to get that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, especially if they want to help us with the Gaze of Hormuz.
Exactly.
So the good news for the OGs who are currently subscribed is that as we take our price increase, you are godfathered in or grandfathered into the current price. So if you stick with us, don't worry about it. You should be able to pay the same $350 going forward. But we are raising the price, TBD on the actual price, but it'll be a modest increase, not a gigantic one, even though we are giving you 2 bots for 1. So some of you who have joined the Substack as a free subscriber, you've gotten a little beta test with the Christopher bot. Apologies, that's gone away. You better jam out with the Christopher bot while you can for free. But what we found was that Christopher bot was being very, very helpful, as you would expect, because the real Christopher is such. And so we are combining both of those offers into the founding tier. So you get 2 bots for 1. We're getting a 2.0 version that's coming out on the Eddie bot. And then the 1.0 version, the Christopher bot, as we mentioned, answers and analytics around stories and parables, mini books and podcasts, but they should be complementary. And, if you think about not only has the progress in the bot been significant, as we've said, the number of free Scooby snacks that you get with the sub has just, every book comes out, it comes out on the founding tier. And so it's partly our demonstration to lead by example of valuing our own value, number one. But then kind of the bottom line is that it's also our commitment to keep elevating the game and make sure that this category does go from search to answers to outcomes. And this is how we're going to be able to do it, is to twice a year release new versions of the bot and then continue to add value, get you closer to your outcomes. And we'll probably take price once a year, give or take with it. But always with an eye towards, are we delivering 10x the ROI on it than what your people are paying for it. So that's the state of the union for custom AI bots. All I had to share. I don't know if Bree or Christopher, you had anything else that you wanted to mention?
What I want to know is, has somebody built the custom AI bot that has all of the content of The Big Lebowski in it?
I think I saw that the other day.
I will pay $750,000 a year for that bot. I tell people, listen, actually, here's the bot we should create. Maybe I wonder if I could get away with this. I'd have to do it for free probably, because if you charge money, you're stealing IC. But the bot I really want has Spinal Tap and The Big Lebowski in the bot. And you can have a conversation with both movies at the same time. Because most of what you need to learn in life, Brie, can be learned in those 2 movies.
So what needs to happen for this to work, Christopher, is you just need to keep dropping Spinal Tap and Big Lebowski references in our jam sessions, in the mini books, and in the
This aggression will not
AMAs.
stand, man, said every legendary entrepreneur, category designer, and creator ever. You got that, Lucy? This aggression will not stand, man. That's Big Lebowski, just in case you were wondering which one it was.
That will formally come in the 2.0 Christopher upgrade.
Oh,
Well,
and of
Pirates-
course, Ramone's lyrics. I forgot that.
Can't forget that.
No, basically, there's the works of William Shakespeare, and then there's the lyrics to Beat on the Brat with the baseball bat, oh yeah,
They're kind of the same.
which is
That
an
is
actual
true.
song. The song goes, beat on the brat, beat on the brat, beat on the brat with the baseball bat, oh yeah, yeah, oh. That's the song.
Well, and the trick is going to be, how do we play the Jeopardy game with that? Like, if that's the answer, what is the question that is
What was the
answering?
question? If beat on the brat with the baseball bat, oh yeah, is the answer.
Well, Pirates, custom AI bots, they're not a feature. They're a test. We're taking our bet on this. And if you want to see what the category designed AI bots look like in 2026, the Pirate Eddie bot is upgraded. Go test it out, and you can now access the Pirate Christopher bot. And bonus points, if you want to put your intellectual capital into a custom bot, we'll have another cohort coming up in the month of June. And if you're interested, you can send me an email, Brie, B-R-I, not B-R-I-E, even though it's a delicious cheese, B-R-I, at categorypirates.com. So all
You
sorts
mean
of
you're
things
not a
happening.
delicious cheese?
I am a delicious cheese. You just got to spell it right. I'm my own category of cheese, if you will. Anyways, Pirates, it's been great having you today, and you should go check out those bots and send me an email if you're interested. Till next time.